So today we're talking about demand avoidance, and this is something that a lot of people don't know about. And I don't know if, like, for me, learning about demand avoidance was just like a huge game changer. And it's not necessarily like a diagnosis; it's one of the traits that we can have, and it explains so much. So I trust and I hope that this will give you some insight, like it did me, because it just is it's so interesting. And a lot of people don't talk about it. So demand avoidance is actually a thing. And so what I'm going to talk about is what is demand avoidance? What does it look like? How does it impact real estate agents and entrepreneurs? And then like some strategies to work with it, because you probably experienced this and you may not have heard this before. And then a couple other just tools and things to be aware of. And then I'm also at the end going to talk about like demand avoidance versus PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance for people on the autism spectrum. So there's some overlap and there's some differences. And I know we have a lot of people who are on the spectrum. I'm mildly on the autism spectrum as well. And they're two different things: demand avoidance and pathological demand avoidance. So to keep it not as confusing, I'm going to talk about that at the end. And if you are on the spectrum, it might resonate. And then we'll do our Q&A about 30 minutes in. So that's the agenda. And so demand avoidance. What demand avoidance is, and chances are you probably experienced this. It's an overwhelming anxiety or resistance triggered by perceived demands. This could be external or internal. So it is related to pathological demand avoidance with autism, which I'll talk about at the end. It's also a common ADHD trait without having that. And so some examples of that could be, if you've experienced this, like intending to make calls that you avoid the phone for hours. You resistance to replying to texts or emails, like even important ones. Somebody says, is this related to ODD? Yes, they're kind of all in the same family. So skipping tasks you actually want to do, right? Like following up with a lead, something you know you should do. You want yourself to do it. And what's happening, why this happens, when we've talked about executive function, where our brain, an ADHD brain, has these amazing gifts, and sometimes we can have trouble kind of breaking down tasks or starting with our dopamine levels. It's also neurologically, demand sometimes can create a threat response activation. So it can trigger a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn in us. And so when there's a demand that we want to do, think of calling, right? Think of calling or doing lead gen, and there's a threat, and we freeze. We don't do it. We get paralyzed, or we can. And so this is a thing, and it's important to know about so we don't get in some kind of shame spiral, right? And so it can also look like, let's say you're doing something, and then your partner, like let's say you're cleaning the dishes, right? You're already doing it, and your partner or your friend or your spouse or your parent or your kid, somebody says, "Hey, I really need to clean the dishes. Like they've been there forever. I really need you to do that," and you're already doing it, and then it's like you feel irritated. Like I don't want to do it now. I'm already doing, it's like I'm not going to do it now. It can look like that as well. Or it can be just a resistance, like it's a threat response to a potential threat in our mind, even though we know calling somebody is not a threat, right? And so it's really interesting when we look at real estate and entrepreneurs, is like we're supposed to be self-starters, right? We're goal getters. That's our whole thing. And so when we get in this cycle, so essentially we procrastinated, or I mean, my thoughts on procrastination. I think there can be different labels for that, but procrastination, from what I've studied, is like you want to do it, you could do it, but you don't want to, right? You could do it, but you don't want to, and you choose not to. And procrastination feels fun. Like it feels fun. It feels like you're being bad. Like, oh, I'm not gonna do the laundry. I'm gonna watch TV. This is awesome. Whereas like demand avoidance or executive function for us would be, I need to do the laundry. I really need to do it. Why can't I get up? Why is this so difficult? It shouldn't be that hard. It's just this small task. And you sit on the couch and it looks like you're scrolling on your phone, and people are like, oh, they're relaxing, they're procrastinating, but really you have this like internal monologue that's like, just get up. Like, come on, it's not that big of a deal. Let's go. Let's go. Come on, buddy. Like it's not that, just go put the laundry in, and you try to get motivated. You think, well, let me keep scrolling until I get motivated. We're really like wanting dopamine or our frontal lobe to activate. And they're very different things. And executive function or demand avoidance, it doesn't feel good, right? Procrastination should feel kind of fun, or like, you kind of be mad where this doesn't feel good. You feel bad. And I absolutely have experienced this a lot of my life. And so anyways, for me, having a name for it was very validating versus just this, man, I'm this master procrastinator, right? And so then when we're in real estate and we're entrepreneurs, we're supposed to be self-starters. We are our own boss. And so it adds another pressure. And so things that can feel like demands are cold calling. Who's not been super excited about cold calling or hasn't felt great about it? Like a lot of us, right? And that could be, follow-ups. It feels like a demand, rules that are there. And the interesting thing with this is it can be rules from other people or it can be rules from ourself. If you've ever like created a time blocking or structure or discipline or workout plan or whatever, and you have it and all of a sudden it feels suffocating. It feels like too much. And then we get into a freeze and we get paralyzed and we don't do it. And then we beat ourselves up. And so this can show up from other people demanding stuff, or it can come up from ourselves internally. And that's why if you're on these calls, I talk about not being so rigid. Like we do well with structure, but if there's too much structure, we can rebel. And a lot of times it's tied to that demand avoidance. And so again, with lead generation, the cold calling, the door knocking, follow-ups, we know they work, right? We know they work, but we freeze up or we delay or we feel lazy or unmotivated. And really it's neurological resistance. There's not something wrong with you. You're not lazy. You're not unmotivated. It's neurological resistance. And we're going to talk about what you can do about it. This isn't permanent. There's all kinds of tools. So some other ways this can impact us is, like I said, time blocking and scheduling, right? So even those self-imposed plans can trigger avoidance. Like I told myself I'd do this at 10 a.m. and now it feels impossible. Or I said I'd do it at 10 a.m. and then 10 a.m. comes and it's like 10:05 and 10:10. And I don't know about you, but something in my brain is like, well, now I got to wait till 11 to start. Now I got to wait till 10:30 instead of just like 10:05. Just do it at 10:05. Do it at 10:10 or 10:10. And then real estate, it's got like it kind of thrives on demand, right? So it's this inconsistent rhythm, and so demand avoidance comes up because this person needs something and this person, and it's like all of a sudden, and all these people have access to us, right? And we've got our phones, and there's all these demands, and so it can also just make us shut down. And it can make us like just kind of go internal or just stop answering because it's too much and it's like feels like this big threat to our neurological system. So again, this can also happen with client communication, like delay in sending documents or returning texts, even though it feels urgent. I know a lot of us have done that. And then it feels like too long, like you didn't get back to them. And now our rejection sensitivity dysphoria comes in. It's like, oh man, I was supposed to get back to him. I didn't do it. Now it's way too late. So the demand avoidant comes in where we don't respond right away. And then over time, now it's too late. And now we feel like bad or shame or rejection. And then we don't do it. And then it just layers on the story that we tell ourselves about who we are, right? And if we're good or not at this job, and we can just go on this spiral instead of recognizing this is a neurological thing that we can work with. And we have this, I know I've seen, because I've coached a lot of agents over the last 7 years, this internal guilt that grows. And it's just this guilt, and it can get to a point where we just like kind of shut down or like just ghost. Like if you're just like, I can't even, and then another place that I see this show up a lot as a ADHD real estate coach is in marketing, especially social media. This resistance to create content, or videos, or posts. Like we know it builds our brand. We know people are all over social media, and then having like I've got to create one video a day, or I've got to do content or whatever. At first it's new and it feels fun, and then it feels like this perceived pressure sometimes, or a rule, right? When it's not fun and new anymore, it feels like a rule, and we're not getting the same amount of dopamine, and it's almost like the opposite, so it can feel like pretty defeating, or like we almost lose trust in ourselves or confidence in ourselves and our abilities, and like we think something's wrong with us, or we're lazy, or we're immature, or we're not disciplined enough, and all that stuff. And that's not what's going on at all. That's not what's going on. We have more sensitive nervous systems, like we just do. And so we're going to be more sensitive to rigidity and rules. And it's really what's happening is our nervous system, our brain, with the story we're telling ourselves, it's trying to protect us. It's trying to keep us regulated, where it's like, well, if I do this thing and this and this and this, you go into fight or flight, like I'm not gonna be able to regulate, or this perceived thing's gonna happen, or I'm gonna have anxiety. So it's trying to like almost keep us safe in a way, even though that's not necessarily what's going on. And that can be for some people. So a lot of times, and some of you know I have a mental health background, and the more that I studied psychology and I worked in I had clinical supervision and residential programs, the more that I learned a lot of our brain is trying to protect us, even if it doesn't feel like it, right? If we're getting anxiety or panic attacks or anxiety about something, it's trying to save us from whatever that pain is. If we're getting angry, if we feel really angry, a lot of times it's telling us our boundaries were crossed, or something's not okay, or maybe that person's not okay, or it's not safe. There's our brain's trying to do a lot of things for us. Or if it's there's resistance to get on the calls, it's trying to keep you regulated because it might dysregulate you. And so that's a totally different way of looking at your brain, is that it's trying to help you, even if it's running from like the reptilian survival point of view. And when you look at it that way versus something's wrong with you, and you be curious, that's when you can kind of talk to that reptilian part of your brain, the survival part, from the, I guess they say like the superego or the ego, and kind of soothe that and have a little bit more control. But just know that your brain's trying to help you. You have a really good brain, and all of us has kept us alive this long and is trying to help you. So when we're looking at strategies to work with this demand avoidance, we want to offer tools and tactics to reduce like that internal resistance. So you'll notice that we're not saying discipline, just do it, suck it up, try harder, have punishment. Like that's not what I see work for most people. Maybe some people with ADHD, but for me, that's just going to shut me down more, and I'm not going to care. Like if I have a real estate coach, I've had them before, that are like drill sergeants with a lot of punishment, I just won't even care. I'll cancel. It's not going to work. I need somebody that believes in me, that helps me work with my brain. So that's what I encourage you to do, is work with it. We're going to reframe some stuff. So the first one is, and this is really big, when there's a demand, we're going to rephrase it as like an option. So for example, like I have to do the laundry right now. I have to do it, no matter what, versus like I could choose to do the laundry if I want to, and I'm going to feel so much better. And so it's reframing that internal voice. And I think some of you know, like I've done over 10,000 one-on-one calls with real estate agents, most of them with ADHD, and that is how I phrase stuff. I don't say, "Hey, I need you to do this." I learned that pretty quickly. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. So I'd say, "Hey, what do you want to do? I know you said it'd be really helpful. Is that something you want to do by next call?" It's a very different phrasing than if I'm working with someone who doesn't have ADHD, because with them, I'm going to be firmer because they want the rigidity. They don't have the same brain wiring, and they also they have different gifts. They don't have the same gifts you have. So I love working with ADHD agents like myself as well. And so I'm going to reframe it. And I'm not going to do this as demand. And if you have kids who are neurodivergent, putting it as an option is going to be so much easier. So you could change I have to I choose to, I get to, or I get to choose to. Not I have to do the laundry, as I'm choosing to do the laundry right now because I know how much better I'm going to feel. Or I get to do the laundry because I have time to do it right now, and that's what I want. So anything we do really is a choice. Like unless somebody's got a gun to your head, right? We are choosing to do things. You still have choice. You could just run out of the house. And so just like rephrasing that things are choices is it's simple. It's just something in your brain, but it's really helpful. And then just you can make it more light and playful. Like let's see how fun this can be. Let's see how fast I can do this. I've also worked with kids a lot too. I used to work in the school system with actually kids with autism and special needs. And I was a Special Olympics basketball coach. I was really fun with Down syndrome. And so it was fun, right? We can make it fun. We can do it with ourselves. It's like, how fast can you tie your shoe? Oh my gosh, you're so good at it. Like, wow, look, did you see him tie his shoe? I mean, and it's like, I know that's silly, but it's also fun. Like, you can do the laundry. How fast can you get it in there? Can you do it on this commercial break or something? So it just depends. I like to be playful and like have fun and make little I don't know, like timers and things like that on some things. It just depends, and it changes things versus this. A lot of us have this really harsh voice in our mind that we need it because harshness creates cortisol, right? And then cortisol creates dopamine, and we're at a lower level of dopamine than a non-ADHD person. And so we can actually get addicted to that harshness because, or we needed it to survive because we didn't have other tools. It's the only thing that gave us dopamine, which is the fuel to go. So you might be operating on harshness 2.0, and you get to change it now, and things will get easier instead of this cortisol stress kind of relationship that you may have. So number two, so one, refrain as demand options, make it playful. I choose to, I get to. And so instead of just I have to, there's this demand. So number two is lower the stakes. So a lot of us, any procrastinators here? Like, or maybe not procrastinator, perfectionist. I'm sorry. Any perfectionists here? Perfectionist. Somebody's like, yeah, I'm a perfectionist. Okay. So perfectionist. Yeah. And that's like kind of our MO. A lot of us are perfectionists, most of us. And so sometimes we can not start something because it's not going to be good enough, or we're not going to do it perfect enough, or that post on social media isn't good enough, or that email is not good enough, so I'm not going to send it, or I'm just going to leave this text because it's really important and I need to answer it right. And then now it's 3 days later and I didn't do it. And now I'm embarrassed. I'm not going to answer it. That's Tyler. I do that sometimes and I'm working on it. So lowering the stakes, give yourself permission to do a bad version first, or like 80% good enough. So do some imperfect calls, make a messy post, draft an email, just something where it's like, it's going to be good enough, or I'm going to do it bad first. Or I'm going to record a reel and it's going to be messy. And the first 5 or the first 3 are not going to be the takes that I do. And then you get going and it's going to be so much easier. So lower the stakes, because we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And when you lower the stakes, a lot of times you can lower the resistance around it. Number 3 is time tricks. So micro deadlines. I'll just do this for 5 minutes, So that's something, dishes for years have been difficult for me because I have sensory stuff. And so I don't love like the food. That's part of my autism. I have a lot of sensitivities with just sensory stuff and touch and sound and everything. And so thinking of just doing the dishes and like feeling like my hands are too like wet and there's like gross food and the smell, just everything. If I tell myself just do a couple dishes or just do it for 5 minutes and that's it, I'll just do it for 5 minutes and then you're done. That helps a lot. I also wear gloves too, and that's another accommodation. But you're seeing it's not forcing, it's not harshness. I tried that for a long time. It didn't work for me, and I don't see it work for clients. So set those micro deadlines. I'll do it just for 5 minutes. You can use a timer as well, or a visual timer. And then the Pomodoro method is something that a lot of people benefit from. And that's, you might work for 20 minutes and then 5-minute break, 20 minutes, 5-minute break, or you could do 30 and 10 minutes, however you want to do it. You could do that. And then what they call is temptation bundling. This was a new term in my research. So you're pairing an unpleasant task with something that you really like. So you're going to pair them together. So let's say you have to do your taxes and you hate it so much. Well, maybe you allow yourself to go to a coffee shop and get like a fancy, frappuccino that you'd never get because it's too expensive and it's really sugary, something. Or you really don't, you need to get more movement in and you just don't want to go for a walk, but then you download your favorite podcast or a book on tape that you allow yourself to buy, and then you can go do it. So pairing these, and again, knowing there's demand avoidance is so helpful because you can add in accommodations versus just beating yourself up and thinking you just got to do it or you failed. And then body doubling, we talked about that a bit before. So work in the presence of someone else, like even virtually. And if you're in KW ADHD, that group, the KW only group, we have a body double room, and we're going to be getting one. If you're not with KW, for our ADHD agents paid group, we'll have that coming in our group program. So you can do co-working Zooms. FocusMate is for ADHD. So FocusMate is basically body doubling. You can pay a monthly fee and schedule a body doubling appointment with someone else. And what that does, it creates urgency and like there's somebody there, somebody watching, and it can make things a lot easier and kind of bypass that. The next one is task chunking or verbalizing the steps. And so with our brains, with the way they operate, and there's so many great things that our brains do. We can see the big picture. We can think really big. Sometimes we have trouble chunking down tasks. So let's say if it's like I need to follow up with leads, that feels really overwhelming, and we can see all the tasks at once, and it feels like too much. And it's like there's a bunch of tabs open on your computer, and it just shuts down, and we freeze, right? Or we get the demand avoidance. But if we chunk it down and we say, okay, first I'm going to open the CRM, you might even say it out loud. Then I'm going to look at yesterday's leads, and then I'm going to text one person, right? Open the CRM, and you might like write it down, or you might use ChatGPT to break it down, something. So instead of this big thing that feels big, once we have the steps, it can get a lot easier. So chunking that down. Goblin Tools is amazing for that. I'm actually going to show you that because somebody showed me this, and I just think it's amazing. So I'm going to do a screen share just in the middle of this because I want you to see it. So this is Goblin Tools, and I highly recommend this if you get stuck. So what you can do is you can, let's see, you can take something and it'll chunk it down for you. So let's say follow up with real estate leads. Let's just see what it's going to do. And then you can use this, break down the item. And look, it's gonna give you all this. Identify new and existing real estate leads to follow up with, review previous communication notes, determine the best method, craft personalized message, reach out to each lead, respond, like it'll do this. It's like, clean my office. And that can feel like,
Tyler,
yeah.
how'd you find Goblin Tools rather than OneNote or Todoist? Did you look at a few different things, or this was just referred to you, you liked it, and you went with it?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them. It's so simple. There wasn't a login. You didn't have to pay. And so somebody showed me this. So, I mean, this is just different ones work for different of our brains, but this one I can hop on in 2 seconds, type it in, and boom. And so that's why because there's less steps. But Todoist is really cool too. So yeah, good question. So yeah, you can see clean my work office, right? So now, because this can feel like this big task, and now it's this, and maybe you say, hey, I'm going to do one. Like I'm going to do one today, I'll do one tomorrow. I'm going to do two. I'm going to do as many as I can for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and stop. So that can help with the resistance as well. And yeah, there's some other tools that are good as well. And yeah, OneNotes. I mean, there's a lot of different ones. So you just figure out what works for you. So yeah, you can say them out loud. You can write them like a checklist. And then gamify. So gamify and track them. So I know a lot of people on here might have whiteboards or stickers. Trello is a tool. Notion. There's some other apps and things out there that I've heard people use. I don't personally use, but I've heard good things about them. And so you might have, or like a sheet where you can check stuff off, like a chart or something when you're doing lead gen, and just make it a game. Like how many calls can I make before lunch? Or I have 30 minutes, how many I can do, or how many awkward, like how many awkward calls, or how many times can I get hung up on when I call first of owners? Let's see, if you do that, you don't have to. But yeah, so gamifying and tracking can be fun because what we're doing is you'll see a lot of this, we're shifting the focus on I have to do this thing, right? I have to do this. This has to get done. And we're shifting like the way we're viewing it, whether it's an option, whether we're gamifying it, we're adding a reward, we're pairing it with something. So we're shifting from that, I have to do this and looking at it as demand. And then a couple things about like emotion regulation, because a lot of times this is really about emotion regulation. We're avoiding things because it causes emotional pain, which is our emotion regulation, which is something is common with ADHD, to have a difference in that, which is also like with emotion, we can feel big feelings. We can feel intensely, and we can be really passionate about stuff. So a lot of our traits have something great behind it, a silver lining behind it. It's just in some scenarios where it's not really as beneficial, then we need to put accommodations in place. And so if you have anxiety about calling and you can calm the anxiety, sometimes you can call, if door knocking, it's like soothing our nervous system. And so some ways that you can do that is one, self-compassion, right? Like identifying what is and having compassion. And so it's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's our brain, our nervous system trying to maintain equilibrium. And so in not punishing yourself, because punishing typically increases avoidance. And so if you shift it to curiosity and softness, it can actually reduce it. And it's interesting because you'd think like we're in this achievement world and we don't want to be soft with ourselves, right? We don't want to, baby ourselves or whatever. And a lot of times it actually soothes our anxiety. And so when we can regulate ourselves and go back to baseline with softness, we're like, I haven't met anybody yet with ADHD that I've coached that is just soft and doesn't care. No, we're like always striving because we've always had to try so hard. A lot of us, like our whole lives, to kind of compensate. And so if you're gentle with yourself, it's not the same as someone who could do it and is just babying themselves. You might actually get to baseline, to be gentle with yourself. And then we know how learning based we are and how much we want to grow. And it's like you're going to pick it up tomorrow. So don't worry about being too gentle with yourself unless you're really seeing a pattern there, which can be scary if you've just been punishing yourself your whole life. But that curiosity is going to move you forward, because when you judge yourself and your harshness, it keeps you stuck and it keeps you dysregulated. And then you feel bad about yourself. And now you're using all of your dopamine in your brain to regulate because you have these bad feelings. But if you say, I am just having complete resistance to calling, like, what's going on? Oh, like I've got anxiety. What am I got anxiety about? You know what? I'm afraid of being rejected, or I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to do, or I just can't do it. Now we've got what the core objective is. Like, sellers and buyers have objectives. We have them too when we don't do stuff that we're resistant. So we want to get to the core objective. But if we just write it off as something's wrong with us, or we're lazy, or we need more discipline, you're not going to move forward. Like, curiosity is going to move you forward way more than force. Because you'll act, instead of like throwing a cortisol stress band-aid on it, you're actually going to get data and get tools in place where it doesn't happen the next time. And so number two, this is really interesting in my research. A lot of us as ADHDers, we need emotional safety to act. So that goes back to our nervous system, our brain. If we feel safe and regulated, boom, like we got this. We can do stuff that nobody else can do in like 2 days that might take them 3 months, So we want to get routines in place that feel nurturing and like fill up our energy, that aren't just constant punishment and like we think we should do this and we got to do this and we're supposed to do this. We want it to fuel us and not feel like a punishment. And also limiting over scheduling if you can. So allowing some flex and not just, taking on tons and tons of commitments, because some of us can be people pleasers. Definitely, I'm a lot better, but I would just say yes to so much in the past, and that limited me so much. So giving time to breathe and not over scheduling, because eventually, if you're just going, and demand, that's where we get burnout and like depression, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. And then this is another one. So we need accountability. We need it. It's really helpful to have accountability. Very important for us. And it's the type of accountability. So shame-based accountability is probably just going to make you feel worse. So when you're working with a coach, if you have someone that uses pain and shame, there's some people that do okay with that. Again, we're all made differently. But accountability that I've seen work for a lot of agents is more about checking in. And because we're already so harsh on ourselves. So for example, let's say you're doing you have a task you're supposed to do by that call, and then you get on the call and you haven't done it. And this is something you can do with yourself. This is something I do with the client. Like I would say, hey, last week you said making 5 calls was really important to you, or 10 calls. And this week it sounds like you didn't do it. Tell me about it. Like for some people, that is enough. It depends on the person. Right? That is enough. And they feel bad and they beat themselves up. I don't even need to. They're already shaming themselves. Right? So it's there. And then we're coming from curiosity. We're saying, okay, what changed? Is it still important to you? Yes, it's still important. Just as important, less important. No, it's even more important. Okay. What got in your way? Right? Like what happened? What do you think happened? What would you do differently? Where was the breakdown? And where did you get stuck, and what came up for you, and what was the fear, what was the pain you were avoiding, right? So this is how we're drawing this out, and then we're going to get clarity. And the next time that happens, then you can walk yourself through that process in your brain yourself and work yourself through the resistance, and it doesn't happen again. So accountability, yes. And again, some people really want like firm deadlines and paying money, and as a consequence, you can do that. I would say a lot of us do better with the curiosity based, not all, but do better with that curiosity based accountability where we're talking and we're learning. Because I've also done the rigid and you're going to pay $500 to this if you don't do this. And it works for a couple weeks and then it doesn't. And then there's this huge shame spiral. And they feel like they failed. So it's also okay to say, let me try this for a week versus this is the new rule and I do it forever. Because what we're working at is something that works for you. That's what it is. Like it's not that you pay $500; it's we get you to do the thing. So we want accountability. We want someone checking. We want someone to answer to. It's really good for us, and it's important that it's helpful and it's empowering, not making a shame spiral. Um, and then also reducing decision fatigue. So low pressure systems that can reduce decision fatigue can be really helpful for us too. And so you might have something you fill out that doesn't take that long because we don't want another thing that you get resistance because there's all these steps, you know? So we want to avoid decision fatigue. And just in general, like if you know you want to make calls, figure it out the night before instead of that morning, and then it's the morning and you're not regulated and you're not sure what you need to do, and then you just don't do it, you freeze. Like if you can do it in advance, it's really helpful. And then a couple other things like building an ADHD-friendly business, right? So structuring the business to reduce demand. So if you are continually saying the same thing to somebody or answering the same questions in email, build a template, copy paste, and make it easier. Get automations on your emails or your follow-ups, outsource admin tasks, or use certain things like Zapier as an example, Zapier. It's really cool. It's kind of AI, and you can say, hey, when someone fills out this form, add them to a calendar invite. So it's kind of like a virtual assistant, but it's AI, and it's not that expensive. So the more that you can reduce some of these like tedious tasks that aren't new, challenging, or fun, you're reducing the demands. And then get support if you need it. Ask for support. That's another thing. And a lot of times, I mean, I don't know about you, but like we don't ask for help. Like I don't. I'm working on it, I'm getting a lot better. But I don't ask for support sometimes. I think, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm gonna figure it out. And so it's okay to ask for help. And people like to help, especially another ADHDer. We love to help. So yeah, we're working with it. As you'll notice, we're working with our brain instead of trying to pretend that's not how it's wired, because there's other amazing gifts, and we just beat ourselves up, then we're going to be overwhelmed and not be able to do the stuff that's really like good for us because we're so tired trying to recover from beating ourselves up. So now I'm going to talk about here at the end demand avoidance versus pathological demand avoidance with autism, which is really an interesting thing. And I'm doing it at the end because I didn't want to make it too confusing. But so demand avoidance, which we just talked about, that's a common experience in ADHD and neurodivergence. And it involves like resisting tasks, right? Like even the ones we want to do. And it's caused by executive function. So this is kind of a recap. Executive function, task initiation difficulty, anxiety about failure, overwhelm, perfectionism, emotional dysregulation, sensory overload, and it's like inconsistent, right? Some days are worse than others. It's more in cognitive overwhelm, and it improves with structure, body doubling, coaching. Okay, so that's demand avoidance, what we just talked about. Now, there's something called pathological demand avoidance, or PDA, and this is more common in autism, and it's more recognized in the UK, but it's something that's talked about here. And it's extreme anxiety-driven avoidance of everyday demands and expectations. So this is a little bit different. I'm going to show you a chart after I go through this. So it's caused by like our nervous system, because with autism, and I say our because I have them, we take in 70% more data and information in the world, and our brain synapses work differently. So our nervous system can perceive any demand as a threat to our autonomy or safety. So it's deep rooted in like a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, and it's a perceived loss of control. And when you're walking around in the world with autism and you have a different wiring and you're taking in so much stimulus, it's really overwhelming. And so over time, and it could be really early on, if you lose control, you're like, think of if you hear music out, somebody's playing music but 70% louder, and the lights are 70% brighter, and the texture is 70% more rough. In the glass, I don't have glasses because sometimes my brain just literally, I've got multiple pairs. My brain just can't do it. It's all I can think about is the pressure on my head. And so I have contacts in right now, and I work with it, right? Um, the pathological demand avoidance is kind of like a more extreme version. And with ADHD, we do take in more stimulus than a non-ADHD person, not 70% more like autism if you're just ADHD. So you are more sensitive to light and sounds, and autism's just turning the volume up even more. And so that loss of control is not, I'm a control freak. It's, oh my gosh, like the world is traumatic in a way to my sensors is so overwhelming. And so losing control of that stimulus or where I'm going or what I'm doing and not being able to regulate feels really scary because it's a threat to the nervous system. So it can show up, and it depends on if you have level 1, 2, or 3 autism. So I have level 1, and then level 3 is going to be on the opposite, where nonverbal, you can't take care of yourself. So level 2 is going to be in the middle, and then level 1, you probably wouldn't know unless I told you. Some people knew before I did. So how it can show up is like a sudden outburst or a shutdown when you're asked to do something, especially for kids. And this is for kids too, like using manipulation or distraction to avoid. So making jokes, excuses, arguing, like anything, because you're thinking there's this threat. So how can I avoid this threat to my nervous system? Extreme resistance even to things that the person wants to do. And then like a big aversion to being told what to do. So an example of this is like guided meditations. I struggle with them because they're telling me what to do, and I don't like it, so I can't do them. Like, don't tell me to tense up my, my shoulder, or my hand, or whatever. And so it's kind of funny. So it's highly oppositional behavior. It looks intentional, but it's anxiety driven. And then it just, it feels uncontrollable, like a panic. And so it's more common in autism. So here's a chart. I'll just do this really quick. So I know some people have autism, some people have kids. So here you can see demand avoidance versus pathological demand avoidance. So if you see that they're two different things, I wanted to be clear about that, right? So we're looking at more severity, more consistency, it's more extreme. And panic, rage, identity threat. Yeah. So those are the two. So that is my summary on demand avoidance. Cool. All right. Well, great. Thank you everybody for being here. This is just, oh man, the chat is amazing. I'm gonna go back and look through it. So have a wonderful day, and then we'll see you next week. So, all right. Take care, everybody.